It's that time again. The annual conference of the American Society of Ag Consultants, otherwise known as ASAC, is going to be held in Fort Myers, Florida, this November 4th and 5th. Kurt Covington is one of 9 professionals who will address the conference. The other speakers who will cover a wide range of topics represent Florida Farm Bureau, Florida Citrus Commission, University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, National Ag Law Center, Risk Mitigators and Advisors, Tyler Associates, as well as the lead economist for dairy at CoBank, and myself, Chrissy Wozniak from North American Ag. The day and a half of presentations will be followed by ag tours on Tuesday afternoon at Echo Farms, one of my favorite places here in Fort Myers. Attendees will experience farming at its most creative, with unique demonstrations, plants, and techniques being used to help farmers and urban gardeners in developing countries. A second tour at Echo will showcase simple technologies that can improve food, water, and shelter for millions of people. A third tour of a hydroponic grower is also being planned. For more information and to register, visit www.agconsultants.org. That's www.agconsultants.org. See you there. Many innovations for the agriculture industry show promise in the lab and controlled small plot settings, but fall short when it comes to capturing complete data from the field. From the start, Intent built its business on bringing efficiency and effectiveness to field trials, helping clients reach their business goals. Since then, Intent has unveiled its InVision software, which works in conjunction with Intent's farmer trials network of more than 1,500 growers to maximize data collection and quality. Today, Intent's sole focus remains the same, to equip agribusiness with better data. But the manner in which Intent is able to collect, interpret, and model that data is light years ahead of what was previously thought possible. To learn more about Intent, visit intent.ag. That's Intent, INTENT.ag. Hi, and welcome to North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. Today, we're joined by a third-generation dairy farmer who, together with her father, manages a very cool business called CowPots. The family invented and manufactures biodegradable containers using the dairy farm's digested and composted manure. From East Canaan, Connecticut, I would like to welcome Amanda Freund. Welcome, Amanda, and thank you so much for being here today.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here.
So let's start off with your background. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your farm.
So my farm started actually with my grandfather. So as you said, third generation. So Eugene Freund was actually a boy from the Bronx, and he served in the army. And when he returned, he was visiting a friend that he made while serving, who just happened to live just over the state line. So we're like 5 minutes south of Massachusetts. And when one of the local farmers heard that there were a couple young and eligible bachelors that were in the area, he brought his daughter Esther to go visit. And so while he had his sights on the friend, instead Esther met Eugene. And so it was love at first sight, and the two got married on Christmas Day, 1948, and they started dairy farming together in 1949. And so we've been here for over 7 decades. And actually the original dairy barn that they started milking in has been, was constructed by the Warner family, who were deeded land when our town was first incorporated. So there's a lot of history here, a lot of agricultural history. And we're just kind of a continuation of the farming story for what happens, nestled right next to the Blackberry River here. So it started as a dairy operation, and then my mom has grown and expanded a farm market, which now involves a greenhouse, garden center, catering business. She's even done seamstressing for wedding dresses because she's crazy. And then the third farming operation that exists here is what we're going to talk a little bit more about, which is our CowPots operation.
Oh, that's so cool. What an amazing story. And to think the dairy farm started in your family and from the Bronx. So tell me more about your grandmother then. Did she come from a dairy farm then? And they lived in a time where you could actually buy a farm if you weren't into farming either, right?
Yeah. Um, Esther's family was dairy farming. And in fact, the house
Okay.
that I bought just a third of a mile down the road from our farm, I sit right across the street from the dairy barn where her family was dairy
Wow.
farming. And so her brother took on the family dairy farm, and my grandfather was actually, instead of being a cattle dealer, he was kind of a farm dealer. So he would go and buy up parcels and kind of set up a infant farm operation, and then he would sell it. So at that point in the 1940s, there were a lot of people that were, I mean, post World War II, looking for opportunities, and this was a community where there was a really strong farming community that they could, come, and it was totally feasible to just start dairy
Right.
farming. Um,
That's crazy. That's unheard of these days, right?
it is. And so her brother ended up deciding that dairy farming was not really in the cards for him. So he actually read in an agricultural journal in the 1960s this idea of like renting out like one of your fields for campers. And so he started with that idea 60 years ago. And
Wow.
today he has the largest campground in the state of Connecticut.
Really? Oh my goodness. What entrepreneurs in your family? That's amazing.
Yeah, and needless to say, they got rid of the cows. Like they decided
Right.
camping was a much more lucrative business to be in. But so yeah, so her farm family stopped keeping dairy cows, but the barn is still standing.
Wow, that is very cool. So now tell me, how did the idea of turning poop into pots, how did that come about? And tell me where, how this whole idea, how it came to fruition.
So, as any dairy farmer knows, when you have one cow and when you have 100 cows, regardless, you've got a lot of byproducts. So, like, you might be in the
Mhm.
business of, selling milk or beef or veal, but you inevitably are going to also have a lot of manure. And there's certainly a lot of farmers that have figured out a way to capture the value of that by selling compost. And it certainly serves a really important purpose on our farm as fertilizer. So that's how we, maintain the fertility of all the cropland that we then grow to feed the cows. But there is an abundance, and there's more than what we really need to apply to our cropland. So back nearly 30 years ago, our farm started collaborating with our neighbors. So the livestock producers of the Canaan Valley came together to start talking openly about this resource, and how do we better manage it? Because we're all sharing the same watershed. So the Blackberry River passes through our farms and inevitably will end up going into the Housatonic River, which goes to Long Island Sound. And in a state like Connecticut, where you've got a lot more people than cows, you have to anticipate that there are going to be an increase in regulations. And so, how do we stay ahead of the curve rather than trying to catch up? So, we as a cooperative structure were able to actually access some grants early on. And we also were able to sit around the table with folks that were from the Department of Ag and Department of Environmental Protection and NRCS, FSA. I mean, it was like, acronym soup, but all the different people that have some kind of involvement in agriculture and land management. And it was at one of those meetings that a representative from the Department of Agriculture said, "Why don't you just make a flower pot out of it?" And that just resonated with my dad. Like he didn't stop thinking about that. And so it began a 6-year exploratory phase of how do I make a flower pot out of cow manure?
Wow. That is so cool. So do you have a biodigester or something? Like what's the process?
Yeah, so we actually have the longest continuously running digester in the country,
Wow.
which is fun to say, not fun to manage. So the thing is a dinosaur. It's not the way that they build digesters anymore. It's a in-ground U vessel plug flow digester. Most of the digesters today are above ground tanks with agitators.
Yeah.
This thing is a bit archaic, but it's still doing the job. So since 1997, we have been digesting our cow's manure, and that biogas is captured and burned as an alternative to propane. So that's how we heat our farmhouse and our hot water. So we're not generating electricity, but we are reducing our kind of use of a fossil fuel for heat. And then after the digester, it goes through a screw press separator. And so we're squeezing the liquid, and that's what we then store in a lagoon, which will then pump through a dragline system for fertilizing our cropland. And then the solid portion of the manure is blown into an in-vessel composter. So only about 85 or 15% of manure is solid, right? So the mass is liquid, which is what's used for fertility for our crops. But that 15% fiber is then composted, and that is what is delivered to our CowPots factory, as well as to our cow barn for bedding.
Amazing. So then you take all the water out, and then when you go to press it, do you have to add like an agent to stick it back together again? So it doesn't flake apart?
So the process is type 2 pulp molding. So it's not a press as much as it's like we're pulping and then we're making it a slurry again. And then you basically have a screen with vacuum pressure that enters into this like bath of fibers in the liquid. And then as it sucks, the liquid can pass through the screen, but the fibers adhere to the outside of the screen.
Oh,
So then
interesting.
there's a male and female dye, and then it is able to form both the inside and outside shape and set it on a drying rack, which then goes into an oven and dried to 0% moisture, because that way we can definitively know that we have removed any concern for pathogen, right? So
Oh,
E.
right.
coli
Yeah.
and salmonella rely on moisture to survive. And with a manure-based product, we're obviously very mindful of any of that bacteria. So by drying it, we get rid of any of those pathogens, and we make sure that it doesn't get moldy, and you can store it in, your warehouse for months and years.
Right. And how are they sold? Like, do you package them in boxes, I guess, and stack them together? Is that
Yeah, so
yeah.
we have 15 styles, and so we a range of different variations for how they can get packed for storage and shipping. But we also do some retail packaging. So when you go to like a local garden center, there's a small pack that has the picture of the cow and the name, our brand on it. But otherwise, a lot of our customers are growers, so they don't need the packaging. They just want a bulk loose fit case of it. And so what's cool is that we designed our facility to be zero waste stream. So the only thing that leaves that building is the water vapor from when we're drying the product and the finished product that's packed and ready for market. And anything that doesn't meet our quality standards, we will recycle as bedding for our cows.
Wow. And so is the screen still in there, or is the screen removed?
It's the screen is attached to the equipment. So
Okay.
once it blows it off onto the drying tray, the screen continues to be in production. So
Oh,
what is
wow.
the finished product that is set on the drying tray is just the contents of the cow pot.
Amazing. So what about what is there has to be benefits of having this, um, obviously compared to traditional plastic. I'm assuming it would be more like peat pots. And what are growers saying about the difference between, the three different mediums?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, plastic, people are getting a lot more conscientious about the fact that plastic is a bit of a challenge, because especially with the black plastic that is so common in horticulture, little of that is actually recyclable. So there's certainly growers that can reuse that pot next year, but you cannot expect that you're going to put it in your recycling bin and it's going to go anywhere other than the landfill. And lately there's a lot more concern about peat. and it doesn't actually break down all that well. Peat is inert, so there's no nutrient value. And to actually harvest peat, you're disturbing an ecosystem that takes 100 years to regenerate. So with manure and making cow pots, our cows are providing us the raw material every single day, whether we're making pots or not. And manure is a resource that's available all around the globe. Like, right? This is not just an American byproduct. This is a byproduct being produced everywhere. And so for our farm, it's alleviating us of having this excess nutrient, and it's providing growers a biodegradable container that has some nutrients. So that nitrogen that's in that pot, it's not going to sustain your plant, but it's going to be what allows that pot to break down faster in the soil because of the nitrogen. And the pot is actually, the way that we're forming it, it basically tangles the fibers together. So you take those fibers from the manure and you just kind of like weave them together. So instead of it being like plastered or like sealed together, so it ends up making for a very porous pot wall, which really encourages root penetration so that you never end up with a root bound plant. And when it's time to transplant, you put the whole thing in the ground. You're not disturbing the roots, so you're reducing transplant shock, and you're left with absolutely nothing to throw away.
Oh, that is so cool. I'm an obsessive gardener too. So that is very cool. I hope garden centers bring this on and I can buy plants without disturbing roots. That would be just so cool. I love it.
Yeah.
So are there other products then besides pots that you think could be created and used for other uses to reduce more of plastic?
That's what we're hoping. So
Yeah.
we have made some custom products per request for the hunting industry. We've gotten some inquiries about packaging. So we're actually in the process of investigating getting into the packaging industry for uh, basically supporting wine bottles for like a
Oh, wow.
subscription program. So if you're getting 4 or 6 bottles of wine each month from a certain winery, like what if we could upsell that winery so that instead of placing their wine bottles in cardboard, it would be protected in and nested in a product coming from our facility. And then the
Mm.
end user, instead of, tossing it into their recycle bin, they could either start seeds in it or break it apart and just throw it in their garden. And it's
Oh,
actually
that's neat.
benefiting them rather than going through a waste stream.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love this. So what are your plans for expanding? I can see that you have a very bright future. Do you have any plans for expansion at this point?
So we have signed a contract of sorts with a biogas facility in Australia.
Wow.
We cannot export any cow pots from the US to Australia because of their import regulations. They're
Okay.
very protective of bringing in animal byproducts. So it's not competing with ourselves if we can't even access the market there. So there is a biogas facility that is being installed in Nowra, Australia, and they are very interested in basically setting up a cowpots production facility on the backside of their digester. So that's kind of phase one of an expansion opportunity for us. And I guess the more obvious one for what we're able to do from our own facility as it stands now is just continue to offer new products. So this
Yeah.
season, we went to market with our 15th style, which is a 10-row tray for seed starting. So we're
Wow.
mindful of just always being able to provide growers and gardeners with a variation of products.
And can gardeners order online?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to our website, cowpots.com, whether you're looking for thousands of pots, our online store lists wholesale prices. But if
Mhm.
you're looking for 10 or 20 pots, we have a page dedicated to home gardeners, and we kind of give you guidance on some of the retailers that we work with that can offer those lower quantities.
Right. Wow. And what is your approach to marketing? How did you get this ball rolling from the beginning? Did you set out with a strategic plan, or was it just word of mouth?
Yeah, that sounds like it was organized. I mean, so, dairy farmers are a
Mhm.
bit risk adverse when it comes to spending money on things like marketing. So for a very long time in the beginning, CowPots really had to, I mean, we were an, uh, an initiative and an activity that sat under the umbrella of the dairy farm.
Mm.
So this has been very much a grassroots effort, and early on we got some really nice early adopters, that seed companies and some garden supply catalog companies that embraced the idea of this being a niche product. Like, they were excited to be first to market with the item. But when you're a 15-year-old company, like, you don't really want to be niche anymore. Like, we
Yeah.
want the bigger commercial growers to take us seriously. So it is, just being kind of a broken record, being really repetitive, and going back even when you're turned down, and asking for folks to give you a try again and again and again. My first job out of college was making cold sales calls to garden centers in our family minivan. So
Yeah.
we've been turned down a lot of times, but we've been embraced just enough times. So it's just an important reminder to not let those failures define you, and let them just kind of be guardrails and guiding you to, pursue other things. But it's marketing, I would say, is probably the most challenging aspect of what we do. We know how to make pots. We
Yeah.
know how to, run an efficient business, but how do we expand that market is, I feel like I'm figuring it out every day.
Right. Yeah. Oh, very cool. And clearly, your family is very entrepreneurial minded. So, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs, especially in our industry, if they're looking to start their own ag business?
Networking is so important. I mean, the reason that we were able to get to where we are is because my dad found a local engineer that had just retired from a Pfizer plant that processes limestone, and he was curious enough that he was willing to actually do the brainstorming. And so, I mean, having the resources of like-minded people, and even people with different mindsets, to help you do the things that you don't necessarily do very well. And really, I mean, we have been turned down a lot of times, because, I mean, a pot made out of poop, like, it's comedy, right? Like, people
It is, yeah.
don't know whether they want to take you seriously. And so, not letting that dissuade you. Like, it would be
Yeah.
so easy to give up every time we heard no. Um, and I mean, between networking, perseverance, and knowing what your story is, and being passionate about sharing your story. When I go to a trade show, every time anybody gives me that 10-second window, right? Like, they look over just long enough for me to engage with them, they stick around for 5 minutes, because, like, the story that I have to share is a really compelling one, because I'm really passionate about it. So know what your story is and be willing to share it all the time.
Great advice. And I know you spent some time with the Peace Corps in Zambia, which is another really cool part of your life. So, what did you learn from that, and how did it affect your life?
It's funny. I went to go work for NRCS when I came home from Peace Corps, and it became uh, uniquely. I was surprised at how this little tidbit would become stand out for me from my Peace Corps experience to going to work for the NRCS, and that was, if you feed people, they will come to your meetings.
That's so true.
So I would say that was my real takeaway from Peace Corps is that as long as I made sure there was food at my different farmer workshops and meetings, I would have excellent attendance.
Oh, I love that.
But
Oh, that's
I would
amazing.
say that I I don't know the impact that I necessarily left for the people of my village in Chilingoshi, Zambia, but the impact that being accepted into that community had on me is
Yeah.
profound. And so I I it is there are so many incredibly hardworking communities that their entire purpose is to just get food on their plate. I mean, I lived in a community of subsistence farmers, predominantly women that are going out to the field each day, and that is a successful day is when bellies are full around around their home, and their entire livelihood is dedicated to making sure that they can just nourish each other. And it's both, scary when you don't have anything to lose, but also I think I found that people were way happier than I would say most of us here are. I mean, I came home and I had a cell phone bill, a health insurance bill, a car insurance bill. I mean, just like the bills that we are faced with each day, it's a different standard of living.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's so interesting. Talking to people who have come back from trips like that, and it always seems the same. Like they've gained more than they think that they gave when they were over there, just in learning how to appreciate things more and embrace more simplicity. I think that's just so cool.
Yeah, one of the
Mhm.
projects that I took on was showing them how to make compost piles. But when I discovered that the only way to turn the pile is with a hoe, I realized, oh crap, like at home we use a skid steer. Like it's a lot easier and a lot more effective to actually seriously consider composting when you have mechanization to do it. But turning a
Right.
compost pile with a hoe is really disappointing.
Oh, I love it. So, one last question for you. W- Why do you serve in this way, and what are you the most passionate about in your day-to-day life?
I am that's an interesting question. And well, I mean, let's see. I spent a lot of time running away from this farm. I I went to go work for a congresswoman and I went over the ocean to go live in a mud hut. Like I actively avoided coming back to this farm. But then I reached a point while living in my mud hut where all I wanted was to be able to start my day with a cup of coffee with my dad. And the fact that my family's business is an operation that allows me to have that proximity to my family while also having gainful employment is unique. And um, they drive me crazy, but to be able to be invested and involved in something that my dad created and to be on a land base that I can support and continuing to provide nourishment for my family and my community is really there's nothing else that I would want to do. I think feeding people is really exceptional work, and it's not it's a privilege. It is a privilege, and to be part of that food supply. And while I'm directly involved in the manure management access, like part of it, like it's a little bit removed, but it's a critical element to being able to fill people's bellies. And so, whether it was in Zambia and working with local farmers on growing beans, or here in Canaan, Connecticut, where I know that the milk that leaves that farm each day is feeding people in my community, that's all I need to feel good about a day's work.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Thank you. And again, where can people find you and find more information about CowPots?
Yeah, cowpots.com, COWPOTS. And the best thing that you could ever do for me, like if I'm going to ask a favor of you for listening, is go to your local garden center and ask for the product.
Oh, that's
It's
easy.
been grassroots from the beginning. So if you ask for it, then they will consider putting it on their shelf.
Right. Yes, that's perfect. I think everybody can do that. If we all do that, then we'll create the more demand than you can handle.
I love it. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Amanda. Great conversation. And it's really cool to learn about your family and your business.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And thanks to everyone who's watching or listening. If you want to learn more, links are provided in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to North American Egg Spotlight on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Listen Notes, Rumble, Telegram, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you liked this episode, I would love it if you shared it. Have a great day. Thanks so much for listening to today's Egg Spotlight episode, where we put the spotlight on people and companies doing great things for the agricultural industry. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, or on your favorite podcasting platform, and give us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on YouTube and Rumble to see the video version of Ag Spotlight. Also, head on over to NorthAmericanAg.com to subscribe to our Industry Connect update newsletter. If you're interested in advertising opportunities, email us at connect@NorthAmericanAg.com. Thanks for listening.